The sound of glass shattering tore through the hallway of the Gangnam International School. It wasn't the sound of play. It was the sound of pure, uncontrollable rage. Inside the principal's office, the phone line was dead silent. "Say that again," the voice on the other end said. It was deep, calm, and terrifying. Principal Kim wiped sweat from his forehead. Through the glass window, he watched 3 teachers backing away from a 5-year-old boy holding a heavy wooden chair over his head. "Mr. Han," the principal stammered. It's Leo. He's having another episode. He bit Mississippi Park. He threw a tablet through the window. We can't control him. You need to come. No." On the other side of Seoul, in a boardroom made of black marble and steel, Jean ended the call. He didn't say goodbye. He just set the phone down on the table with a heavy thud. The room full of executives went deathly quiet. Jean stood up. He was a man who controlled the city's shipping lines, its construction, and its underworld. He wasn't used to losing control. But right now, he looked like a man who had just been hit in the chest. "Meeting adjourned," Jean said. "Sir," his assistant whispered, rushing to his side. "The merger. If you leave now, the investors will walk." Jean stopped at the door. He had just his cufflinks. His face was stone. "Let them walk," Jean said coldly. "My son is crying." He walked out. And just like that, the most dangerous man in Seoul left a $1 billion deal for a 5-year-old boy. If you love stories about men who would burn the world for their family, hit that like button right now. It helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let's see what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. 30 minutes later, a fleet of black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the school. Jean stepped out before the car even stopped moving. He marched up the stairs, his bodyguards scrambling to keep up. He was angry. Not at the school, he could buy the school and fire everyone tomorrow. But at himself. Every nanny had quit. Every doctor had failed. Leo hadn't spoken a word since the accident 2 years ago. The boy was a storm, destroying everything in his path, and Jean was powerless to stop it. He kicked open the double doors to the kindergarten wing. "Where is he?" Jean barked. The hallway was a mess. A mural was torn down. A teacher was crying in the corner, holding an ice pack to her arm. "Room 3, the teacher pointed, trembling. "But sir, be careful. He's wild." Jean ignored her. He marched toward room 3, bracing himself. He expected to hear screaming. He expected to see his son terrified, fighting off adults who looked at him like he was a monster. He reached for the handle. And then, he stopped. Silence. No screaming. No crashing. Just humming. A deep, rhythmic humming. It didn't sound like a nursery rhyme. It sounded soulful. Grounded. Like the earth itself. Boy asleep now. Jean frowned. He pushed the door open. The classroom was a disaster zone. Tables were overturned. Paint was splattered on the walls. But in the center of the chaos sat a woman. She wasn't wearing the beige uniform of the other teachers. She was wearing a simple dress, with a scarf of vibrant orange and blue wrapped around her head. The colors were so bright they seemed to cut through the gray afternoon light. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor. And on her back was Leo. Jean's breath caught in his throat. Leo was tied securely to her back with a piece of colorful fabric, his small head resting against her shoulder blades, his legs wrapped around her waist. The woman was rocking back and forth, tapping a gentle beat on the desk with her palm. Tap, tap, thud, tap. Leo wasn't screaming. He was fast asleep. His thumb was in his mouth, and his other hand was clutching the bright fabric of her dress like it was a lifeline. Jean stood frozen. For 2 years, Leo hadn't let anyone touch him. He slept in fits and starts, screaming from nightmares. And here he was, strapped to a stranger, sleeping peacefully. The woman didn't turn around. "If you slam that door, Olga," she whispered, her voice thick with an accent Jean couldn't place, "you and I will have a very big problem." Jean blinked. "Olga?" He didn't know the word, but he knew the tone. "Who are you?" Jean asked. The woman stood up slowly. She moved with a heavy, deliberate grace, adjusting the sleeping boy on her back. She turned around to face him. She was stunning. Her skin was deep mahogany, glowing under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes were dark, fierce, and completely unimpressed by his expensive suit. "I am the substitute for the arts class," she said. "My name is Ada, and you must be the father who is too busy making money to teach his son how to breathe." The bodyguard behind Jean stepped forward. "Watch your mouth." Jean held up a hand. He stared at Ada. He stared at his sleeping son. "Put him down," Jean commanded. Ada raised an eyebrow. You want me to wake him? Are you crazy? I said put him down. Jean stepped closer. He towered over her, but Ada didn't flinch. She just looked up at him. He is exhausted, Ada said, her voice low but firm. He was fighting the whole world for an hour, because everyone was looking at him with fear. He needs rest. He feels my heartbeat on his back. It calms him. He isn't a monster, Jean said defensively. I know, Ada said softer this time. She looked over her shoulder at the sleeping boy. He is just a little boy with too much noise in his head. And nobody here knows how to give him quiet. She looked back at Jean. Except me. Jean looked at her hands. They were covered in paint. There was a bruise on her arm where Leo must have hit her. But she wasn't complaining. She was protecting him. Give me my son, Jean said, extending his arms. We are leaving. Ada hesitated. She assessed him. Then she slowly untied the knot at her chest. She swung Leo around gently, transferring him into Jean's arms. Leo stirred. When he saw Jean, he stiffened. He didn't hug his father. He looked at Jean with wide, fearful eyes, then looked back at Ada, reaching his small hand out toward her. The rejection hit Jean harder than a physical blow. Mama, Leo mouthed. No sound, just the shape of the word. Jean froze. Ada stepped forward and took Leo's reaching hand. She squeezed it. Oya, easy now, she smiled at the boy. Papa is here. Go home. Sleep. Leo's hand lingered in hers, then dropped. He buried his face in Jean's shoulder, defeated. Jean held his son tight. He looked at Ada. He saw the scuff marks on her shoes. He saw the pride in her posture. Eugene said, What is your full name? Adana, she said. Why? You want to report me for doing my job? I want you to come with me, Jean said. Ada laughed. It was a bright, loud sound. Come with you? To where? Mister, I don't know who you think you are, but I don't follow strange men into black cars. I have a bus to catch. She turned around and started picking up the fallen crayons. Jean watched her. He felt a desperate need in his gut. Not for her, but for the silence she created. He needed his son to be okay. He pulled out his phone. He dialed his personal investigator. Get me everything on the substitute teacher. Adana. Nigerian national. No. He waited 10 seconds. Ada was humming again as she cleaned up. Sir, the voice in his ear crackled. Adana Okeke. Visa expired 3 weeks ago. She's working illegally, facing deportation. Also, significant debt in Lagos. Her mother needs heart surgery. Jean hung up. His face hardened. He didn't like doing this, but he was a desperate father. He walked over to where Ada was kneeling. Miss Adana, Jean said. Ada didn't look up. I am busy, Olga. You are illegal, Jean said. Ada froze. The crayon in her hand snapped. The humming stopped. Your visa expired 21 days ago, Jean continued, his voice flat. If the immigration officers find you here, you will be on a plane tonight. And your mother in Lagos? She won't get her surgery. Ada stood up slowly. The warmth vanished from her eyes. You investigated me? She asked quietly. In 10 seconds. I own this city, Jean said. I know everything. He took a step closer. Here is the deal, Jean said. My son needs you. You are the only one he doesn't scream at. You are the only one he touches. So you threaten me? Ada crossed her arms. You think you can bully me? I don't think, Jean said. I know. Because you are a good woman, Adana. You won't leave a child who needs you. He slipped a business card into her hand. Pack your bags, he ordered. You are moving into my house tonight. You will be his private governess. 24 hours a day. In exchange, I fix your visa. I pay for your mother's surgery. And if I say no, Ada challenged. Then I make a phone call, Jean said. And you go back to Nigeria with nothing. Ada stared at him. She looked at the card. Then she looked at Leo, watching them from the bodyguard's arms. She took a deep breath. She muttered something in her language, looking at the ceiling for strength. Fine, she spat the word out. I will come. But get one thing clear. She stepped forward and poked him in the chest. Hard. Right on his silk tie. Jean looked down at her finger in shock. I am a teacher, Ada said fiercely. I am not a servant. I am not a slave. And I am definitely not scared of a rich man in a suit. She grabbed her worn-out tote bag. I will fix your son, she promised. But don't think for 1 second that you can fix me. Jean stared at her. His chest felt tight where she had poked him. We'll see, Jean muttered. He turned and walked away. Be ready at 6 p.m., he called back. Don't be late. Ada watched him go. She shook her head. This man, she whispered to the empty classroom. He thinks because he roars, he is a lion. He doesn't know who he is dealing with. She just poked the most powerful man in Seoul in the chest. Can you believe the audacity? If you are already loving Ada's confidence, comment Team Ada down below. And subscribe because trust me, Jean has no idea what he just invited into his house. The rain started falling as the sun went down over Seoul. Jean sat in the back of his limousine, watching the city blur by. Leo was awake now, strapped in his car seat. He was silent, spinning a small plastic wheel in his hands over and over again. Leo, Jean said softly. The boy didn't blink. He didn't turn. It was like Jean didn't exist. Jean clenched his jaw. The rejection stung. He remembered the way Leo had slept on the Nigerian woman's back. The way he had reached for her hand. Why her? Jean thought bitterly. Why a stranger? The car turned into the private driveway of the Han estate. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. Concrete. Glass. Cold. We're here, boss, the driver said. Jean got out. The staff was lined up at the front door, bowing low. Welcome home, sir. Jean ignored them. He lifted Leo out of the car. Leo went limp, a dead weight in his arms. Take him to his room, Jean ordered the head maid. Bath. Dinner. As the maid took Leo away, a taxi pulled up behind the fleet of black SUVs. It was an old, beat-up orange taxi. It looked ridiculous parked next to the luxury cars. The door opened. Ada stepped out. She had two large, battered suitcases. She was wearing a thick coat over her dress, shivering slightly in the damp air. She looked up at the massive mansion. She didn't look impressed. She looked critical. Jean walked down the steps. You're 5 minutes early, Jean said. Traffic was light, Ada replied, pulling her suitcase from the trunk herself. She looked at the gray concrete walls. So Ada said, gesturing to the fortress. This is where you keep him? It looks like a prison. Jean's eye twitched. It is an architectural masterpiece. It is gray, Ada interrupted. Everything is gray. The sky is gray. The house is gray. Your suit is gray. Do you people have an allergy to color? Jean took a deep breath. Patience, he told himself. She is here for Leo. Inside, Jean ordered. My assistant will show you to your room. Leo is being bathed. You will supervise his dinner. I will supervise nothing, Ada said, dragging her suitcase up the stairs past him. I will eat with him. We break bread together. That is how trust is built. She stopped at the top of the stairs and looked back at him. The rain caught in her braids. And Olga? She added. If I am living here, I am cooking my own food. I cannot survive on cabbage and water. Jean watched her disappear into his house. The vibrant blue of her headscarf was the only spot of color in the entire estate. He felt a headache coming on. 1 year, he muttered to himself. I just have to survive 1 year. He walked inside. He didn't know it yet, but the gray walls of his life were about to be painted in colors he had never even imagined. The heavy oak doors of the master dining room creaked open, echoing like a tomb. Inside, the room was vast. A long table made of black glass stretched down the center, big enough to seat 20 people. But there were only 2 place settings. One at the head of the table for Jean. One to his right for Leo. Jean sat in silence, scrolling through a tablet. He didn't look up when the maids brought in the food. It was precise, elegant, and completely colorless. Steamed whitefish. Plain rice. Clear soup. Leo sat in his high chair, staring blankly at the white wall. He wasn't moving. He wasn't eating. Then, the doors swung open again. Ada walked in. She had changed out of her travel clothes. Now, she wore a loose, flowing house dress patterned with bright yellow suns and green leaves. The sound of her sandals slapping against the marble floor broke the perfect silence. And then came the smell. It hit Jean before she even sat down. It wasn't the smell of sterile cleaners or steamed fish. It was rich. It was heavy. It smelled of thyme, curry, onions, and fire. Jean stopped scrolling. He looked up. Ada was carrying a large steaming bowl in her hands. She marched past the empty chair set for her at the far end of the table, the staff seat, and pulled out the chair directly opposite Jean. She sat down. She placed the bowl on the glass table. The steam rose up, filling the air with the scent of spices that had probably never entered this zip code before. Good evening, Olga, Ada said cheerfully. She looked at Leo. Good evening, little king. Jean stared at the bowl. It was filled with rice that was unmistakably red, topped with fried plantains and chicken that looked like it had been cooked with love, not a manual. What, Jean said, his voice low as that? Dinner, Ada said, picking up her spoon. Jollof rice. Plantain. And pepper chicken. It smells. Jean struggled for a word that wasn't offensive. Not aggressive. It smells like life, Ada corrected him. She looked at Jean's plate. You are eating paper and water. No wonder you are so grumpy. Your soul is starving. The head maid rushed forward, looking terrified. Sir, I told her not to bring outside food into the dining room. I tried to stop her. Jean waved his hand, dismissing the maid. He watched Ada. She took a bite of the chicken, closing her eyes with a hum of satisfaction. Pepper is correct. She opened her eyes and saw Leo staring at her. The boy wasn't looking at the wall anymore. He was looking at the red rice. His nose twitched. Ada smiled. She took a clean spoon. She scooped up a small amount of rice and a piece of sweet plantain. Here, she offered it to Leo. He won't eat that, Jean said immediately. He has a strict diet. Bland foods only. The doctors said spice agitates his condition. The doctors are idiots, Ada said without looking at Jean. She kept the spoon held out to Leo. It's sweet, Leo. Like candy, but better. Try. Leo hesitated. He looked at his father, then at the woman who had carried him on her back. He leaned forward. He opened his mouth. Jean watched in shock as his son, who usually had to be coerced to eat a single grain of rice, took the bite. Leo chewed. His eyes went wide. He grabbed his glass of water and drank, but he didn't spit it out. He swallowed. And then, he pointed at the bowl for more. You see? Ada grinned. He has a Nigerian stomach. He likes flavor. She put a little more on his plate. Jean felt a strange sensation in his chest. Jealousy? Relief? He looked at his own white fish. Suddenly, it looked like wet cardboard. Ada caught him staring. Don't look at me with those hungry eyes, Oga, she teased, pushing the bowl slightly toward the center of the table. Unless you want to try. Jean scoffed. I do not eat street food. It is not street food. It is royal food. But if you are scared of a little pepper, I understand. Stick to your paper fish. She went back to eating. Jean narrowed his eyes. He was the dragon of soul. He feared nothing. He certainly didn't fear rice. He reached out with his fork. He took a forkful of the red rice and chicken. Careful, Ada warned, her eyes twinkling. It bites. Jean put the food in his mouth. At first, it was savory. Rich tomato, onion, thyme. It was delicious. Then, the Scotch bonnet pepper hit him. It exploded in the back of his throat like a grenade. Jean stopped chewing. His eyes watered instantly. His face, usually pale and composed, turned a shade of pink. He felt sweat prickle on his forehead. He swallowed, forcing himself not to cough. He reached for his wine glass and drained it in one gulp. Ada burst out laughing. It was a loud belly laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. Oh, look at you. She laughed, pointing her spoon at him. You are turning red. Do you need milk, Oga? Or maybe a fire extinguisher? Jean wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, regaining his composure. His mouth was burning, his blood was pumping, and his heart was racing. For the first time in 4 years. He felt warm. It is. Edible. Jean lied, his voice raspy. Edible. Ada mimicked him, shaking her head. You enjoyed it. I saw your toes curl. She turned back to Leo, wiping sauce off his chin. Jean watched them. The kitchen was usually a place of silence. Now, it smelled of spices and rang with laughter. It felt like an invasion. But as he watched his son eat a second helping, Jean realized it was an invasion he might be willing to lose. She just fed the dragon spicy jollof rice and lived to tell the tale. If you think Jean is going to end up addicted to her cooking, and her, hit that subscribe button. Because the kitchen isn't the only place where things are about to heat up. The peace didn't last long. 2 days later, the calm was shattered. Not by Leo, but by a visitor. Jean was in his study, reviewing contracts, when the heavy doors burst open. He didn't look up. Only one person dared to enter without knocking. Uncle Jean said coldly. Chairman Han, a man in his 60s with eyes like a shark, walked in. He was followed by 2 lawyers. You missed the board meeting, nephew, Chairman Han said, sitting on the leather sofa without being invited. I was busy, Jean replied, signing a document. Busy playing house with your new pet? The chairman sneered. I heard you hired a foreigner. An illegal one at that. Is this your plan for the heir of the Han Empire? A mute boy raised by a fugitive? Jean stopped writing. He looked up. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Careful, uncle, Jean warned. I am being careful, the chairman stood up. He threw a folder onto Jean's desk. This is a motion for custody. Jean stared at the folder. The board agrees with me. The chairman smiled, showing yellowed teeth. A single father who skips billion-1 mergers to chase after a mentally unstable child is not fit to lead, and certainly not fit to raise the future chairman. We have petitioned the court. Leo will be moved to a private facility in Switzerland next week. For his own good. Jean stood up slowly. You will not touch my son. It's already in motion, the chairman shrugged. Unless, of course, you can prove you have a stable home environment. A mother figure. A balanced life. But you don't have that, do you, Jean? You have a cold, empty house and a hired help with an expired visa. The chairman leaned over the desk. You have 7 days until the hearing. Say goodbye to the boy, Jean. It's for the best. The chairman walked out laughing. Jean stood there, his hand gripping the edge of his mahogany desk, so hard the wood splintered. He needed a solution. He needed a mother for Leo. He needed a stable home. And he needed it now. He looked out the window. Down in the garden, he saw Ada. She was wearing a bright yellow head wrap. She was holding Leo's hands, trying to teach him to jump over a puddle. Leo stumbled, and Ada caught him, swinging him around until his silent mouth opened in a wide, breathless smile. Jean watched them. He didn't need a nanny. A nanny could be fired. A nanny was temporary. He needed something permanent. Something the courts couldn't argue with. He needed a wife. Ada was in the library, dusting books that looked like they hadn't been touched in a century. She was humming a song by Whisket, swaying her hips slightly to the rhythm. The doors closed with a heavy click. Ada turned around. Jean was standing there. He had locked the door. He looked different tonight. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked dangerous. Desperate. Olga? Ada asked, putting the duster down. Why did you lock the door? If you are planning to murder me because I put too much pepper in the soup, I apologize. Jean didn't smile. He walked toward her. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of her, invading her personal space. Ada backed up until her legs hit the edge of the library table. She was trapped. Jean, she whispered, dropping the Olga for the first time. You are scaring me. My uncle was here, Jean said, his voice rough. He is trying to take Leo away. Ada gasped. What? Why? He says I am unfit, Jean said, his eyes burning into hers. He says a single father cannot raise a broken child. He wants to send Leo to an institution in Switzerland. Away from me. Away from you. Over my dead body, Ada hissed, her protective instinct flaring instantly. He is a boy, not a package. He is finally eating. He is finally smiling. I have 7 days, Jean said. 7 days to prove I have a stable home. To prove Leo has a mother. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table next to her hand. Ada looked at the box. Then she looked at him. What is this? Open it. Ada opened the box. Inside sat a diamond ring the size of a grape. It glittered violently in the dim light. She looked up at him confused. Is this a bonus? It's a proposal, Jean said. Ada laughed nervously. Proposal for what? A raise? Marriage, Jean said. The silence in the library was deafening. You have lost your mind, Ada whispered. The pepper has finally cooked your brain. I am perfectly sane, Jean said. He placed his hands on the table on either side of her, boxing her in. He leaned down so his face was inches from hers. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and expensive scotch. I don't need a nanny anymore, Ada, he said intensely. I need a wife. I need Mrs. Hahn. You want me to marry you? Ada's voice rose an octave. We don't even like each other. You think I am loud and annoying, and I think you are an arrogant ice cube. I don't need you to love me, Jean said. I need you to pretend. For 1 year. He stepped closer, his knee brushing against hers. We get married. The courts see a stable family. Leo stays. My uncle loses. And what do I get? Ada asked, breathless, her heart hammering against her ribs. Besides a husband who frowns for a living, everything Jean promised. Citizenship. Permanent residency. I will pay off your family's entire debt in Lagos. I will buy your mother the best house in Abuja. I will give you $5 million when the year is over. Ada's mouth went dry. $5 million. It was enough to change her entire bloodline's destiny. But there are rules, Jean added, his voice dropping lower. Rules? We have to make it look real, Jean said. My uncle has spies everywhere. In the staff. In the garden. He reached out and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. His fingers grazed her neck. Ada shivered. We live together, Jean whispered. We eat together. And we sleep in the same room. Sleep? Ada choked. In the same bed, Jean clarified, his eyes dark. If we have separate rooms, the staff will talk. The spies will know. You want me to sleep in your bed? Ada pushed against his chest, but he was like a rock. And do what? Sleep, Ada, Jean said, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Unless you want to do more. I do not. Ada shouted, though her face was burning hot. Then it's a deal, Jean said. I haven't said yes. Think about Leo, Jean said softly. The leverage. He always knew where to hit. Think about him in a white room in Switzerland, alone, screaming for you. Because he will scream for you, Ada. You are the only one he wants. Ada closed her eyes. She saw Leo's face. She saw the way he clutched her dress. She opened her eyes. She looked at the diamond. She looked at the dangerous, beautiful man trapping her against the table. 1 year? She asked. 365 days, Jean confirmed. And no funny business in the bed? She narrowed her eyes. I will stay on my side, Jean said. If you stay on yours. Ada took a deep breath. She grabbed the ring box. Fine, she said. I will marry you, Olga. But warn your uncle. Warn him of what? That he is about to pick a fight with a Nigerian woman. Ada snapped the box shut. And he is going to lose. Jean stared at her. For a second, he looked at her mouth. I'm counting on it, he murmured. He stepped back, giving her space. The air in the room felt thinner, charged with electricity. The wedding is in 3 days, Jean said, buttoning his cuffs, turning back into the cold Zio. Get a dress. Something. Not yellow. I will wear what I want, Ada called after him. Jean paused at the door. He didn't turn around, but Ada could swear she saw the corner of his lip twitch upward. Good night, Mrs. Han. He walked out. Ada slumped against the table, clutching the ring to her chest. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. Chinik, she whispered to the ceiling. What have I done? She looked at the massive diamond on her finger. Well, she muttered, a small smile forming. At least the food at the wedding will be good. She said yes. But sleeping in the same bed as the dragon without funny business? Yeah, right. If you think that pillow wall is going to come down in about 2 days, smash that like button. Next up, the wedding night. And trust me, it's going to get crowded in that bed. The wedding was a blur. A judge, 2 witnesses, and a signature on a piece of paper that legally bound Adana Okeke to the Dragon of Soul. But the paper part was easy. The hard part began at 10 p.m. that night. The master bedroom of the Han estate was the size of a small apartment. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline of Seoul. In the center of the room sat a bed. A massive king-size bed with sheets made of black silk. Ada stood in the doorway, clutching her toiletry bag like a shield. So, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the silent room. This is it. The battlefield. Jean was already in the room. He was sitting in a leather armchair by the window, reading a file on his tablet. He had discarded his suit jacket, but he was still wearing his dress shirt, the top 2 buttons undone. He didn't look up. The bathroom is on the left. The walk-in closet is on the right. I cleared 3 shelves for you. Try not to fill them with excessive colors. Ada rolled her eyes. She marched into the bathroom. 30 minutes later, the door opened. Steam billowed out, carrying a scent that hit Jean like a physical wave. It wasn't the smell of the expensive, sterile soaps his maids bought. It was warm, nutty, sweet, cocoa butter, shea, and something floral like jasmine oil. Jean stopped reading. His eyes involuntarily drifted over the top of his tablet. Ada stepped out. She wasn't wearing the stiff pajamas he expected. She was wearing a silk robe in a deep emerald green. It was tied loosely at the waist. Her skin, freshly moisturized, glowed under the dim recessed lighting. Her hair was wrapped in a silk bonnet. She looked soft. Jean felt his throat go dry. He shifted in his chair, suddenly finding the room very warm. Enjoying the view, Olga? Jean snapped his gaze back to his tablet. I was checking the time. You take long showers. I am a thorough woman, Ada said, walking over to the vanity table. She began applying lotion to her arms, the slow, rhythmic movement catching Jean's peripheral vision. Are you going to stare at that screen all night? Ada asked. Or are you coming to bed? Jean stood up abruptly. He tossed the tablet onto the chair. I am coming. He walked to the bed. Ada was already there, pulling back the duvet. She grabbed 2 heavy pillows and placed them firmly in the center of the mattress, creating a barrier. This, Ada announced, patting the pillows, is the border. You stay on West Korea. I stay on East Nigeria. If your hand crosses this line, I will bite it. Jean looked at the pillow wall. He let out a short, amused breath. You think a pillow can stop me? He asked, his voice low. I think you are a man of honor, Ada said, climbing into her side and pulling the covers up to her chin. And also you're afraid of my pepper. Jean turned off the lights. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the city lights outside. He climbed into his side of the bed. The mattress dipped. Ada held her breath. She could feel the heat radiating off him. He was huge. Even with the pillows between them, his presence filled the space. For a long time there was silence. Ada? Jean's voice came from the dark. It sounded different. Less guarded. Thank you. Ada blinked in the dark. For what? Leo, Jean said softly. He left today. I heard him from the hallway. He hasn't laughed in 2 years. Ada felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the room temperature. He is a good boy, Jean, she whispered. He just needed permission to be happy. Good night, Mrs. Hahn, Jean murmured. Good night, Olga. Ada turned on her side, facing away from him. But she didn't sleep for a long time. And judging by the way Jean's breathing remained steady and alert, neither did he. The next week was a strange, dizzying mix of domestic chaos and secret glances. The pillow wall stayed up every night, but every morning, they woke up a little closer to it. Once, Ada woke up to find Jean's hand resting on the pillow, inches from her face. Another time, Jean woke up to find Ada's leg thrown over the barrier, her calf resting against his shin. He didn't move his leg. He just lay there for 20 minutes, terrified that if he breathed, she would wake up and move away. But the real test wasn't the bedroom. It was the world outside. Friday night arrived. The Hahn Corporation Charity Gala. This was their debut. The moment they had to convince the elite society of Seoul and Jean's scheming uncle that they were a real, loving couple. Are you ready? Jean called out, adjusting his tuxedo in the foyer. He checked his watch. We are late. You cannot rush perfection, Olga. Ada's voice floated down the stairs. Jean sighed. He turned around to check the time again. And then he stopped. Ada was descending the grand staircase. She had refused the beige designer dresses his stylist sent. Instead, she had commissioned something herself. It was a floor-length gown in deep, shimmering gold. It hugged every curve of her body before flaring out at the bottom. But the fabric wasn't plain. It was embroidered with subtle, traditional Nigerian patterns in black thread. She wore her hair up in intricate braids, adorned with gold cuffs. She looked regal. She looked powerful. She looked like a queen who had come to conquer. Jean felt like he had been punched in the gut. He literally forgot how to exhale. Ada reached the bottom of the stairs. She struck a pose. Well, she challenged. Do I look like a fake wife? Or do I look like the owner of the building? Jean walked up to her. He didn't say a word. He took her hand, raising it to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. You look, Jean whispered, his voice rough, dangerous. Ada's breath hitched. Dangerous is good. Yes, Jean agreed, offering her his arm. Let's go to war. The ballroom was filled with the smell of expensive perfume and fake smiles. When Jean and Ada walked in, the room went silent. It wasn't just because Jean rarely attended these events. It was because of the woman on his arm. In a sea of black suits and pale pastel dresses, Ada was a supernova of gold and melanin. She held her head high, gripping Jean's arm. She could feel the stares, the whispers. Who is she? Is that the nanny? Why is she so dark? Ada tightened her grip on Jean. She kept her smile plastered on her face, but inside, she was tense. Ignore them, Jean murmured, leaning close to her ear. They are sheep. You are a lioness. They moved through the crowd. Jean introduced her to investors and politicians as my wife, Adana. He didn't stutter. He didn't apologize. He said it with a possessive pride that made people stumble over their greetings. Then they ran into the vipers. Jean's uncle, Chairman Hahn, was standing near the bar with a group of socialites. Among them was Mrs. Choi, the wife of a rival construction tycoon, a woman known for her sharp tongue and old money prejudice. Nephew, the chairman smiled thinly. So the rumors are true. You actually married the help. Jean went still. Careful, uncle. Mrs. Choi laughed. She looked Ada up and down with a look of pure disgust, wrinkling her nose as if she smelled something bad. Oh, stop it, Chairman, Mrs. Choi tittered. It's practically charity work. I suppose it's trendy these days to adopt exotic pets. The air around them froze. Ada felt the blood rush to her face. She opened her mouth to snap back, to unleash a verbal slap that would leave this woman crying, but she never got the chance. Jean moved. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He simply stepped forward, placing his body between Ada and the woman. He loomed over Mrs. Choi, his shadow swallowing her up. The temperature in the room seemed to drop to absolute zero. "Mrs. Choi," Jean said. His voice was soft. "Terrible. Look at me." The woman looked up, her smile faltering. She saw death in Jean's eyes. "My wife," Jean said, enunciating every word, "speaks 4 languages. She has a master's degree in education. She raised my son when the best doctors in this country failed. She is not a pet." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper that only their small circle could hear. "She is the queen of my house. And if you ever look at her with anything less than total respect again, I will bankrupt your husband's company by sunrise. Do you understand?" Mrs. Choi turned pale. She trembled, looking at her husband for help, but he was staring at his shoes, terrified of the dragon. I apologize," the woman stammered. "Mrs. Han, I meant no offense." Jean didn't move. He waited. "Adana," Mrs. Choi whispered, bowing her head. "I am sorry." Jean straightened up. He turned to Ada. The terrifying coldness vanished from his face, replaced by a look of concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, ignoring everyone else. Ada looked at him. She had fought her own battles her entire life. She was used to being the strong one, the loud one. But watching this man, this powerful, terrifying man, use his entire weight to shield her, it did something to her heart. "I am fine, Jean," she whispered. Jean nodded. He wrapped his arm around her waist, tight, possessive, claiming her in front of the entire room. "We are leaving," Jean announced to his uncle. "The air in here is polluted." He walked her out. And as they left, Ada noticed something. The whispers weren't mocking anymore. They were terrified. And envious. He literally threatened to bankrupt a company just because someone rolled their eyes at her. If you are loving this protective energy, you need to subscribe right now. Because if you think the ballroom was intense, wait until they get into the back of that limo. The door of the limousine slammed shut, sealing them in the quiet dark. The car started moving, but neither of them spoke. The adrenaline was still pumping through their veins. Ada looked at Jean. He was staring out the window, his jaw clenched, his hand resting on his knee in a fist. He was still angry. "Jean," Ada said softly. He turned to look at her. His eyes were dark, dilated. "You didn't have to do that," Ada said. "I can handle a rude woman. I have heard worse." "I know you can," Jean said roughly. "But you shouldn't have to. Not while you are with me." He shifted on the leather seat, turning his body toward her. "You are my wife, Ada. Fake or not. You carry my name. Anyone who insults you insults me. Is that all it is?" Ada asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Pride?" Jean looked at her. He looked at the way the streetlights outside cast shadows across her gold dress. He looked at her full lips, parted slightly. "No," Jean admitted. "It's not pride." He reached out. His hand, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he touched her cheek. His thumb brushed against her skin, tracing the line of her jaw. "I hated the way she looked at you," Jean whispered. "I wanted to tear the room apart." Ada leaned into his touch. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a drum. The space between them in the car felt non-existent. "Jean." "Ada," he groaned. He leaned in. It wasn't gentle. It was magnetic. His hand slid into the hair at the nape of her neck, pulling her toward him. Ada's hands found the lapels of his tuxedo jacket, gripping tight. Their faces were inches apart. They could feel each other's breath. The smell of his sandalwood cologne mixed with her cocoa butter was intoxicating. Jean tilted his head. His eyes dropped to her lips. "Tell me to stop," Jean warned her, his voice a low growl. "Tell me to stop, Ada. Because if I kiss you now, I am not going to stop." Ada looked at him. She saw the hunger in his eyes. The raw, desperate need that had nothing to do with contracts or visas. She parted her lips. "Don't stop," she whispered. Jean didn't wait. He crashed his lips against hers. It was an explosion. It was fire and ice colliding. Jean kissed her like a starving man, devouring her. Ada kissed him back with equal force, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. He pulled her into his lap, the gold dress pooling around them. His hands roamed over the curves he had been trying to ignore for weeks, gripping her waist, her hips. Ada gasped into his mouth, the sound vibrating through him. For a moment, the world didn't exist. There was no uncle, no custody battle, no fake marriage. Just this heat. Just this man and this woman. The car slowed down. "Sir," the driver's voice came over the intercom, sounding nervous. "We have arrived at the estate." Jean broke the kiss. He pulled back, his chest heaving, his lips swollen. He looked at Ada. She looked wrecked, her lipstick smudged, her eyes hazy with lust. She was beautiful. Jean rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes to regain control. "We are home," he whispered, his voice strained. Ada nodded, breathless. "Yes. Home." Jean helped her straighten her dress. But as he opened the car door, his hand lingered on her lower back. The look he gave her said everything. This isn't over. They walked into the house together. The pillow wall in the bedroom upstairs didn't stand a chance tonight. But fate, as always, had other plans. As they walked through the front door, the lights in the house flickered. Then they went out completely. "Jean," Ada asked, gripping his arm in the sudden darkness. "Stay behind me," Jean said, his voice instantly shifting from lover to killer. He reached inside his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a gun. The silence of the house was wrong. It was too quiet. "Go to the panic room," Jean ordered, pushing her toward the hidden panel in the wall. "Get Leo." "No. What about you?" "I have visitors," Jean said grimly, looking toward the shadows of the living room. The Vipers weren't waiting for the court date. They were here. And the night of passion had just turned into a night of survival. The darkness in the penthouse was absolute. "Go." Jean roared, shoving Ada toward the stairs. "Get Leo." Ada didn't argue. She didn't look back. She kicked off her high heels and ran barefoot up the marble stairs, the gold dress bunched in her hands. Behind her, she heard the sickening crunch of a door being kicked in, followed by the deafening crack of silenced gunfire. She reached the second floor. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Leo," she whispered, screamed, bursting into his room. The room was pitch black. "Leo? Baby, where are you?" A small whimper came from under the bed. Ada dropped to her knees. She dragged the trembling boy out, pulling him into her arms. He was shaking, clutching his toy car. It's okay, Mama is here," she soothed him, though her own hands were trembling. "We are playing a game. Hide and seek. We have to be very quiet." She stood up, lifting him onto her hip. She turned toward the hidden panel in the closet, the panic room Jean had shown her. But she was too late. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. A man, dressed in black, wearing a ski mask. He wasn't looking at Ada. He was looking at the boy. "The chairman sends his regards," the man rasped, stepping forward with a knife glinting in the moonlight. Fear. Ada had felt fear before. She had felt fear when her mother got sick. She had felt fear when the immigration officers knocked on her door. But this was different. This was primal. She looked at the knife. She looked at Leo. And the fear vanished, replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. "Don't you dare," Ada hissed, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Don't you take one more step." The man laughed. He lunged. Ada didn't scream. She didn't cower. She threw Leo onto the soft mattress behind her and grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table. As the man swung the knife, Ada swung the lamp. Crack. She connected with his shoulder hard. The man grunted, stumbling back. But he was a professional killer, and Ada was a teacher. He recovered instantly, slashing out with the knife. Ada raised her arm to block him. Pain. Sharp and searing. The blade sliced across her forearm. But Ada didn't stop. She screamed, a war cry, not a plea, and tackled him. She drove her knee into his stomach, scratching, biting, fighting with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cub. "Get away from my son." She shoved him backward. He tripped over the rug, falling hard. Before he could get up, the bedroom door was blasted off its hinges. Jean stood in the doorway. He looked like a demon. His tuxedo was torn. His face was splattered with blood that wasn't his. He saw the man on the floor. He saw Ada clutching her bleeding arm. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. Bang. Bang. 2 shots. Center mass. The intruder stopped moving. Silence rushed back into the room, louder than the gunshots. Jean dropped the gun. He rushed to Ada, his knees hitting the floor so hard it must have cracked the marble. "Ada," he choked out, his hands hovering over her arm. "Ada, look at me." "I'm fine," Ada gasped, though her vision was swimming. Check Leo. Check Leo." Jean looked at the bed. Leo was curled in a ball, staring at them with wide, terrified eyes. He was unharmed. Jean turned back to Ada. He saw the blood dripping from her gold dress onto the floor. His face crumbled. The mask of the dragon fell away, leaving just a terrified man. "I told you to run," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you run?" "Nigerian women." Ada winced as he applied pressure to the cut. "We don't run from hyenas, Jean." Jean pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking. And then, a sound. A small, rusty sound. Like a gate opening after years of rust. "Mama." Jean froze. Ada froze. They both turned to the bed. Leo was crawling toward them. He had tears streaming down his face. He reached out a small hand and touched the bandage on Ada's arm. "Mama." Leo sobbed, his voice cracking from disuse. "Ouch. Mama. Don't cry." Jean stopped breathing. 2 years. 2 years of silence. 2 years of doctors, therapists, and screaming. And now, in the middle of blood and broken glass, his son had found his voice. Ada started crying. She ignored the pain in her arm and pulled Leo into the hug, sandwiching him between her and Jean. "I'm not crying, baby," she sobbed, kissing Leo's forehead. "Mama is okay. We are okay." Jean wrapped his massive arms around both of them. He rested his chin on Ada's head, and for the first time in his life, the dragon of soul let tears fall from his eyes. They sat there on the floor, a tangle of gold silk, torn tuxedo, and tears. A fake family that had just become terrifyingly real. "If you aren't crying right now, you might be a robot." Leo spoke. He called her Mama. "If this moment hit you in the feels, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this story. Now, let's see what happens when the adrenaline fades and the truth comes out." An hour later, the police had come and gone. Jean's lawyers handled them in 5 minutes. The bodies were removed. The staff was cleaning the carpets. In the master bathroom, it was quiet. Ada sat on the counter, her gold dress ruined. Jean stood between her legs, a first aid kit open next to him. He was shirtless now, having discarded his ruined tuxedo. He was carefully, gently stitching the cut on her forearm. His hands, usually so lethal, were incredibly tender. "It's not deep," Jean said quietly. "It won't leave a bad scar." "I like scars," Ada whispered. "They show you survived." Jean didn't smile. He tied off the stitch and bandaged her arm. Then he stepped back. He didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. "The contract is void," Jean said. Ada blinked. "What?" "I am transferring $5 million to your account tonight," Jean said, his voice flat and dead. "I have a jet waiting at Incheon. It will take you to Lagos. Or Paris. Wherever you want. Just go." Ada felt cold. "You are firing me? After I saved your son?" "I am saving you," Jean shouted, looking up. His eyes were wild. "Look at you, Ada. You are bleeding. Because of me. I am darkness. I am violence. You are. You are the sun. If you stay here, I will eventually get you killed." He turned away, gripping the sink until his knuckles turned white. "Leo spoke," Jean whispered. "That's all I wanted. You did your job. Now get out before I destroy you too." Silence stretched in the bathroom. Then Ada slid off the counter. She walked up to his back. She wrapped her good arm around his waist, pressing her cheek against his bare back. Jean stiffened. "Ada, don't." "You foolish, foolish man," Ada murmured into his skin. "You think you can make me leave? I just fought a hitman with a lamp. You think I am scared of you?" "I am trying to protect you," Jean groaned. "I don't need protection," Ada said. She moved around him, stepping into his space until she was looking up at his face. "I need a partner." She reached up and cupped his face. "You said you are the darkness," Ada whispered. "And I am the sun." "Yes." "Jean," she smiled, a sad, sweet smile. "Don't you know basic science? The darkness doesn't kill the sun. The sun destroys the darkness." Jean stared at her. He looked at the fierce determination in her eyes. He realized in that moment that he had never stood a chance. He had lost this war the moment she walked into that classroom. "I can't let you go," Jean admitted, his voice ragged. "I am selfish. I want to keep you. Then keep me," Ada challenged. "But not as a fake wife. Not as a nanny." "How then?" "As yours." Jean didn't waste another second. He grabbed her. He lifted her up, pressing her against the cool tiles of the bathroom wall. "Mine," he growled. And then he kissed her. This wasn't like the kiss in the car. That was lust. This was a promise. It was deep, slow, and overwhelming. It was the kiss of a man who had found the only thing in the world worth living for. Ada wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer. I love you, Olga, she whispered against his lips. Jean pulled back just an inch. He looked into her eyes, stripping away all the titles, all the money, all the power. I love you, Ada, he said. More than my own life. He carried her out of the bathroom, his steps heavy and purposeful. The bedroom was dark, lit only by the moonlight spilling through the shattered balcony door. The air was cold, but the heat radiating from Jean's bare chest against Ada's cheek was enough to burn. He reached the massive bed, the bed that had been divided by a wall of pillows for weeks. Jean kicked the pillows off. They tumbled to the floor, forgotten. He lowered Ada onto the black silk sheets. The visual contrast took his breath away. Her deep mahogany skin against the dark silk, her gold dress torn and bloodied, her hair slightly messy from the fight. She looked like a ruin. She looked like a masterpiece. Jean didn't climb over her immediately. He stood at the edge of the bed, looking down at her with a hunger that was terrifying in its intensity. You are beautiful, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel, even covered in blood. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Ada reached up, her hand trembling slightly. Then stop looking, Jean. Come here. Jean climbed onto the bed, hovering over her. He braced his weight on his forearms, caging her in. He didn't touch her yet. He just breathed her in. The scent of cocoa butter, metallic blood, and fear mixed with adrenaline. I need to get this off you, he whispered, his fingers hooking into the strap of her ruined gold dress. Rip it, Ada challenged softly, her eyes locked on his. I never liked it anyway. Jean's eyes darkened. He grabbed the fabric. With one sharp, violent motion, he tore the dress down the middle. The sound of ripping silk echoed in the quiet room. He stripped the fabric away, leaving her bare against the sheets. He didn't rush. He didn't take what he wanted. Instead, he began to worship. His cold hands traced the curve of her hip, the dip of her waist, the swell of her breast. Everywhere he touched, Ada's skin jumped, electric shocks firing through her nerves. He lowered his head. He didn't kiss her lips. He kissed the fresh bandage on her arm. He kissed it gently, reverently, an apology and a promise pressed into her skin. Then he moved lower. He kissed the hollow of her throat. He kissed the pulse fluttering wildly in her neck. Jean, Ada gasped, arching her back as his stubble grazed her sensitive skin. Please. Please what? He growled against her collarbone. Please stop? Or please don't. Don't stop, she moaned. Take me. Claim me. That broke the last of his control. Jean moved up, capturing her lips in a kiss that was savage and desperate. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was oxygen. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, owning her. Ada wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him flush against her. The friction of skin on skin was unbearable. She dug her nails into his bare shoulders, marking him. You are mine. Jean groaned into her mouth, his hips snapping forward, pressing his hardness against her center. No more contracts. No more fake marriage. You are mine, Ada. My wife. My queen. I'm yours. Ada